The Carolina Storyteller is a campfire-style storytelling podcast covering ghost stories, legends, and true crime. Some content may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back, folks. I am the Carolina Storyteller, Jonathan Phoenix, and this is the Carolina Storyteller. So, this week is kind of a special week for me. A year ago, when this episode comes out, I was sitting in a hospital near death. I had developed an infection in my leg. I had 100 and some odd degree fever. And I spent 3 days in the hospital, the first 3 hours of which they didn't know if I was going to make it or if they were just going to have to cut my leg off, because the infection and everything was so bad. I was being pumped full of antibiotics. I had IVs in both arms. So I'm celebrating 1 year of life, basically, after that episode. And I'm 70 pounds lighter than I was last year, which in total in my weight loss journey, I've lost 100 pounds. So it's kind of special to be here today, to be doing this episode. And for this special episode, I have a special story. Very special story. It's a true story. It didn't exactly happen to me, but I was there when it happened. Now, to tell the story, I got to take you back. So let's go back to my teenage years, when I was much, much younger and less gray. And just let me tell you the story. So when I was young, I was a foster child. My foster parents bought this house in downtown Georgetown. Now, this is where I grew up and discovered all of these great ghost stories, because this house was like 200 and some odd years old. Right behind it was the house where the ghost of Theodosia Burr is said to haunt, and is where she stayed her last night before she disappeared on the Patriot in 1812. So that's just to give you an idea on how close I was to the history and the ghost stories that I talk about so much and tell you so much about. I was literally right there. So this house they bought when I was 10 years old, and we moved into this house, and it was basically 4 stories, because it had a small little basement, which you're not supposed to have in South Carolina because of the water table. So it was almost always flooded. But this little basement was probably 15 by 12, and the water heater was down there. And it had a laid-in brick floor that wasn't even mortared. It was just above the dirt. Bricks were laid down on the dirt. And it had entries to the crawl space, but you didn't want to crawl underneath there, because the old well that was on the property from before 200 years ago was directly underneath the kitchen. And it was apparently uncovered. And so that was an issue that you didn't want to run into. And I have to figure out where the Pirates of the Caribbean song is coming from. I apologize. Give me a second. Pirates of the Caribbean song plays at the same time every night on my phone, and I thought I had turned it off. You guys just get that as a little extra added blooper for this episode. Anyway, the house was kind of built over top of the well, and I guess maybe that's so they could access it from the kitchen or something. I didn't design the house. I'm not the architect. I don't know. But anyway, this house was large. I mean, really large. It had, of course, the little basement, and then the porch was the porch on the front, and then like a glassed-in greenhouse room on the side of the house. And then on the back, there was the back door and a set of stairs outside that ran up to like a porch on the back. And when you went in through the front door, you had this main foyer room that was just huge, and then a living room next to it. It was a dining room and a den, and then the kitchen was in the back. And then there was this grand staircase that kind of led upstairs. And upstairs, my room was in the front of it. Was in the front. There was a kind of like a balcony that wrapped around over the greenhouse room and the front porch. And my room had the doors that went out onto the balcony, but it didn't have railing at the time, so I wasn't allowed to go out there. But my room was right there at the front of the house. And then there were, 3 other bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, one at the back of the house. And then there was this unfinished room in the very back of the house. And in this unfinished room were the stairs that led up to the attic. And the attic stretched the entire whole house. And I wanted the attic to be my room so bad because it was huge, for one. It was finished, 2. And 3, it was just such an interesting space. But the problem was this unfinished room that was mainly used for storage for most of the time that I lived there had this kind of closet built into it that had been built in sometime in the 70s or 80s that had an elevator. And the elevator had been kind of decommissioned, but it was still in there. And something about that elevator always creeped me out. I always felt like there was something in that room, in that elevator, that didn't want me in the house. It didn't like me. It didn't feel good. I always thought I was dealing with some kind of spook or specter or something back there. I stayed away from that room as much as possible. And I never went near that elevator. Never. Which is where the story starts to come in. I always felt bad about it. So fast forward to, I'd been living there for a few years. I was in high school. And this is back in the days when, your one friend had the computer and got the computer games, and I just happened to have Doom 2 on my PC. And my friend Frank and our other friend over there, and we were playing on the computer. We were playing the Doom 2. Me and Frank went downstairs to the kitchen to get something to eat. We left Bill upstairs. And we were going to get ready. We were going to go to the movies. And I can't remember what we were going to go see. I don't think it was The Craft. I think it was Mission Impossible or something. This is, 96, 95, 96. It was, it was just the beginning of summer. We were going to go have fun. And anyway, me and Frank are downstairs in the kitchen. We're fixing up some ramen noodles to eat something real quick, and we're grabbing something to drink, and we're, hanging out. And the story that Bill tells us, and this is told to us from Bill's perspective because we don't know what's going on, but Bill is sitting there, and he's sitting in my bedroom at my computer, and he's trying to have this epic run through Doom 2, trying to do everything he can, and to beat the hell spawn that are there. And he starts hearing me call him from the other end of the house. And of course he goes to the stairs first because he thinks I'm downstairs. But then he hears my voice coming from down the hallway. And he starts, checking to see what room I'm in as he's making his way down the hallway, and starts looking for me. And he, you in here? You in there? And he's gradually making his way down the hall. And he keeps hearing me, hey, come here, I got to show you something. Come here, I got to show you something. And he hears me calling him from the back of the house. He makes his way to the back of the house and to the back door. And he opens the back door onto that porch that nobody ever did, to see if I'm out on the porch calling him, and I'm not. And then he goes and reaches for the door to that extra room. And he opens that door. And the second he opens that door, that's when me and Frank are coming back upstairs with our stuff. And I see him, and I'm like, dude, what the hell are you doing? Don't go in that room. And he looks at me and he goes, you just called me. I'm like, no, get away from that room. And all of a sudden, the door closes. and it scares the crap out of him. Now, I thought he shut the door. And looking back, it may have slammed itself. I don't know. But he swears up and down the door slammed on its own. But that I was in the room calling him. And we're like, no, we were downstairs the entire time, dude. And it never happened. And I'd never heard anything calling me back there. I've always been uncomfortable with that room. But so, he was wary about being alone upstairs in my house after that. Until, a couple of months later, he comes back to my house and he says, dude, I had this nightmare about that room. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, what's in that room? Because he didn't get in the room. He didn't get to see it. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, there's something in that room. There's like another door inside that room. And there's something in there. And I'm like, what? And so I take Bill back there and I show him where this elevator is. And it was like just this wooden closet that was built into the room to house the elevator himself. And the door was cracked. And he goes, don't ever open that door. You don't want to know what's in there. He had this nightmare that he had actually gone into the room and opened the door, and something had come out of that elevator, and it was just this horrible thing, and he doesn't even know, couldn't even describe it to me. He just said it was the scariest dream he'd ever had. And after that, he didn't come back to my house. But, when we talk about it, he'd be like, dude, don't ever open that door. Now, like I said, I've always felt uncomfortable. I felt uncomfortable in that room. I felt uncomfortable with that door. I did take a look, and the elevator was put there because the original owner of the house, or not the original, but the owner of the house back in like the, 1920s, 30s, she became elderly in the 50s. And so the elevator was there for her to get up and down with her wheelchair. And it was in use until the 70s, when it was kind of shut off and walled off. But it was never like powered down, apparently, until the mid-90s when we were living there. And someone finally said, hey, why don't we just take the breaker off of it and fully power it down? So where there was always the worry that even though because it went straight down into the kitchen, there was always a worry that someone would accidentally activate the elevator and the elevator would go and crush the kitchen, basically. But I remember, like, nobody liked that room. I never wanted to be in that room until after the events that happened in the graveyard. And then I wasn't scared of that room anymore. I would walk by that room and it felt as if the room was different. It was kind of like, how when an alpha dog walks into a place and the other dogs kind of, get quiet. Well, it was like the dog had decided to be quiet. The dog wasn't threatening me anymore, so I didn't feel threatened by that room. And, for the last 2 years that I lived there, that room didn't bother me. It didn't scare me one bit. It wasn't the least bit disturbing. But when my friends would come over, they would all get uncomfortable around that room. The only one that didn't have a problem was my friend Frank. He never had a problem with it. And in fact, he was like, yeah, there might be something in there, but I'm not scared of it. And you shouldn't be either. And maybe that's what happened, is eventually I became not scared of it. But for the longest time, I was. So that's our story for this week. Not the longest story, I know. But hey, it's a true story. And it falls in the lines with, so many paranormal things that have happened to me in my life. Like I've mentioned, the incident with Storm, my car that, took off down a road on its own, and I still to this day can't explain how that happened. And of course, told you all about the incident in the graveyard, where as I was walking through a graveyard, I saw and heard things that I still to this day can't explain. And, unless my best friend has been lying to me for 40 some odd years, and somehow one of them did do it, they can't explain either. We were all five there, and none of us knows what that was. And I can't explain what happened in this house. I can't explain what it was, other than that Georgetown is a crazy haunted place. There's like I said, you throw a rock and hit a ghost. And, there was, a ghost story about the house next to me. There's a ghost story about the house behind me. But there was no ghost story about my house. There was no legends about my house, no tales about my house. There was a well underneath the house that was supposedly still there that you could fall down and get hurt. And there were trees that were older than Methuselah, almost as old as the angel tree. But I never found any evidence or correlation that some suspicious or mysterious thing was there causing a ghost to be in that house. That being said, I did have a friend who got called to the spooky room and had a spooky nightmare. So maybe the house was haunted. I don't know. I just know I never wanted to go into that elevator. And after that moment, neither did my friend. Thank you guys for listening. Thanks for joining me. As always, remember to go and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, wherever you're hearing this or wherever you look for podcasts, you can find us. We are at thecarolinastoryteller.com and Patreon.com/Carolina Storyteller. And also, in the merch store now, we have the official Lavanya Was Framed t-shirt. That's right. It's there now. Lavanya Was Framed, as well as stickers and a pint glass so far. So, merch is coming. Buy my stuff. Yes, go buy my stuff now. Anyway, again, thanks for listening. I'm the Carolina Storyteller. And stay spooky, my friends.